Assassin's Creed 4 is undeniably one of the most popular games in the entire Assassin's Creed series. I remember loving this game when it came out, and at the time it was arguably my favorite. But it's been many years since I played it from start to finish, so I was excited to hop back in. And I can happily say that while this game definitely has its flaws, it's still one of the best. And I would even go as far as to say it's still up there as one of my favorite gaming experiences of all time. This is Assassin's Creed 4. I have a ton of good things to say about this game, but I can't ignore the most glaring issue this game has. I played it on an Xbox Series X just because I work on a PC all day, so when I'm gaming, I really would prefer to just be a couch potato. And with this being the only title in the whole series that hasn't been enhanced, it runs at 90p at 30 frames per second, which, by today's standards, absolutely sucks. I've been playing almost all of my games at least 1080p 60 frames, and many at even 4K. So the first time booting this game up almost gave me a headache with how muddied and slow everything felt. It took a couple of play sessions for my eyes to completely adjust, which really isn't a huge deal, but it definitely sucks. Especially with how wonderful the art direction is, with the lush green Caribbean jungles, sun-soaked towns and beaches, and accented by a beautiful blue ocean that is still one of the best looking in-games to this date. Whenever I think about pirates, the first thing I think about is the Caribbean Isles. This setting, as with most Assassin's Creed games, is where much of the charm is held for me. Havana specifically is a town that I loved running around in. I think it's just that art style of architecture with the Spanish-style roofs and bright-colored buildings. It invokes a sort of laid-back tropical vibe that just feels warm and inviting to exist in. I think in some ways we get the best of both worlds here with the open world design. We get bigger cities and towns with Havana, Kingston, and Nassau to run around in. Then we get to pair that with a wide open ocean filled with classic Ubisoft open world design that's filled with boxes that I want to check. A testament to the good design behind this game is how almost every side activity you do leads to character and gameplay progression in some meaningful way. Feel like exploring tropical islands? Going on hunts for buried treasure? You are rewarded with gold and blueprints to upgrade your ship. Feel like doing a little hunting? Great, now you have crafting materials to upgrade Edward's personal arsenal. Oh, you feel like doing my personal favorite thing and completing assassination contracts? Then the gold will just be rolling in. To speak on the assassination contract specifically, I think the reason that I love these so much is it feels like in the simplest way what I want from every Assassin's Creed game. Give me a target in a cool setting and let me hunt them down. It's such a simple concept that I think can easily be overlooked in an effort to create a more sophisticated mission structure. But sometimes less is more, and the simplest objectives can provide the most fulfilling gameplay loops. Now it's time to talk about all the activities you can do with the main thing this whole game is built around, the Jackdaw. Out on the open ocean, there are a number of activities to do that once again all feed into your resource pool to make your ship even stronger. You can go deep sea diving for money and blueprints, you can sneak in and steal goods from outposts, assault naval bases, and several other piratey deeds. But by far, what I spent the most time doing was getting into random ship battles. This truly is the mechanic that this whole game is built around, and for good reason. When you think of pirates, what's the first thing that comes to your mind? Ships out in the open sea, duh. What's funny is the fact that this isn't an Assassin's Creed game. Picking fights out in the open sea is kind of against the whole idea of subterfuge and discreetness that assassins abide by. But I'll discuss this whole idea of clashing with traditional AC concepts later in the video. Right now, I just want to acknowledge how much fun the ship combat is here. It almost has this aspect of randomized open world encounters that you would find in JRPGs, but instead, you get to pick your opponents based on the resources they're carrying. These battles normally aren't very long either, which is why I think they feel so rewarding. It's a constant feedback loop of 5-minute long fights, and with every victory, you're just a little bit closer to getting to the next upgrade for your ship. It's the perfect carrot at the end of the stick. And the amazing sound design of cannons booming and men shouting creates these perfect intense little spats that I never got bored of. And I mean, come on, is there anything cooler than hooking onto a ship, boarding it, and clearing out a deck with rapid pistol shots? The best compliment I can give this game is that it's a beautiful open world that I like to be in, filled with tons of stuff to do that never leaves me bored. In my opinion, that's the best thing you can do with a traditional Ubisoft open world design. And probably my favorite thing about it, it's not obnoxiously big like current AC games. I'm not immediately overwhelmed by the insane number of icons and pure size of land masses. Here, we have a completely manageable experience that can be done in 35 hours or less. It was a nice breezy playthrough that kind of made me miss older game lengths. Combat is one of the parts that I'm more down on this game, even more than in past games, and I'm specifically talking about man-to-man combat with swords, not ship battles. Starting off, you feel like you have a smaller arsenal this time around. You get to dual wield swords, which honestly looks really cool, but we don't get a small blade this time around, which if you look at my previous videos, you'll see that I love fighting with daggers. It left me using the hidden blades a ton in open combat, which isn't unusual, but I can definitely say I felt the lack of weapon variety. Honestly, it just feels unpolished. It's fundamentally the same as previous entries where you just wait for attacks to counter and then you chain kill everyone. But I admittedly like the choreography behind lots of the kills, but there is one big issue. Whenever you're hacking through enemies, especially during combo kills, it always feels like the animations are never quite lined up. Sometimes it's awful with bodies and animations being completely off and just ragdolling around, but oftentimes it's just slightly off, just enough that you notice it and it takes away a little of the satisfaction. I think that's the best way to summarize the sword combat. The lack of polish oftentimes just makes it feel unsatisfying. With that being said, I do feel like I'm nitpicking a bit. The sword fighting isn't awful, but at its best it just feels fine. There was never any point that I actively avoided sword fights, but it was never something I looked forward to either. It's just something that I did from moment to moment and kind of felt indifferent about as a whole. Thankfully, there are other aspects of the combat outside of sword fighting that feel spectacular. They updated the shooting from Assassin's Creed 3, and it is a blast. Literally. The sound design is perfect. It can sound a little compressed at times due to it not being a new game, but it's the exact opposite of sword fights. It's extremely satisfying. Getting all 4 pistols and chaining shots together to put 4 men down with ease makes you feel like the most badass pirate around. Not to mention the free aiming isn't terrible. It allows you to pull off some seriously satisfying headshots that leave enemies' heads just snapping back. Stealth is about the same as it was in Assassin's Creed 3, with you using foliage to sneak around, and later in the game you get the rope dart that lets you hang enemies in a terrifying fashion. There is one addition here that I have to mention, because it's one of my favorite weapons probably in the whole series, and that is the blowgun. I think what I love about it is the simple nature of it just being a little bamboo tube that you spit darts out of. It's kind of funny how something so inconspicuous can be so overpowered. I mean, you can sneak into an enemy area and just pick off people with sleep darts or berserk darts and then just stroll right through. It makes stealth easy, but at the same time, fun. It's such an unusual little weapon that I've never used in a game before, so the pure novelty of it really carries it just as far as the functionality. Now, ship combat is polished to a T. It's a more fleshed out and refined version of AC3's, and if you saw that video, you'll know that I really didn't enjoy it in my latest playthrough because I remembered how good this game's ship combat was, and my memories were right and then some. There still hasn't been a game to even come close to capturing open sea ship combat in the same way we have here. And where I feel Edward has less tools than previous characters, I feel like it's made up for with the variety of ship weapons. Whether it be broadside cannons, heavy shot fire barrels for trailing ships, or the devastating long-range mortar, I always felt I had a weapon for every scenario, and I was constantly using them all just to be an absolute menace out on the sea. It creates the same feeling that the combat in all the other titles had, where I have a ton of ways to deal death, but this time out in the open sea. As you may have realized from other videos on my channel, I am a story whore, and I love a good video game story, and that is one of the aspects that I think this game nails. Immediately, the setting of the golden age of piracy is interesting from a narrative aspect. You have a group of men who won't work for a crown that they don't believe speaks for them, but they also can't seem to get out of their own way to build anything lasting. But in my opinion, every good story is only as strong as its characters. And from the beginning, Edward is a leading man filled with so much charm and bravado that you can't help but root for him. Mix that with his outfit that is just ridiculously cool. I feel like Edward even moves with so much charisma and confidence in his walking and running animations that makes you just feel like a dope pirate. But at the same time, he really isn't a good guy. He's a selfish, greedy man whose only interest is based in gold. You see how he treats people like Stede Bonnet, using him for his own selfish gain. But what you begin to learn through several flashbacks throughout the game is how this motivation for fame and fortune comes from a fear of living and dying as a complete nobody, which is something that I think is relatable for many people. It's especially a shame considering how capable he is and how much other characters believe he could achieve so much more in his life if he fought for something other than gold. That kind of speaks to the main problem the pirates are having with the British. They're capable men motivated by selfish causes. Blackbeard's quote puts it best. In a world without gold, we might have been heroes. I think one of the most interesting things about this game is how Edward isn't even an assassin. He's loud, brash, and doesn't understand the creed at all. And in many ways, this isn't really a game about assassins. Nowadays, for this series, that's pretty common. I mean, it's been like 6 years since we've gotten a game where you're an assassin in the Brotherhood. But in this entry, it feels a lot more novel. It allows for a bit of a fresh start and for you to really focus on Edward as a character instead of the overarching themes of the series. He's a character who is around all the staples of the series, like Assassins and Templars, but his motivations don't align with either group. This may rub some fans the wrong way, but for me, that's what makes this game special. I'm going to talk a little bit in spoilery terms, so if you haven't played this game and you want to go completely blind, go ahead and dip out now. The real beauty of this story comes from the journey that Edward goes on. This isn't really a story about the fate of humanity and free will or about some ancient piece of Isu tech. It's a character-driven story of one man and his journey about learning to fight for something bigger than yourself and how temporary the gains from personal victory truly are. The turn is slow and painful for Edward, and he has to cause real problems for those around him and experience harsh personal loss before he even begins to see what his greed has led to. This brings me to the end of the game, that I think is truly spectacular. I honestly think this is the best ending in the whole series. Seeing Edward look around at all his friends he made along the way, many of which have now passed, not realizing that the people all around him were the most important thing, all accompanied by Sarah Green, the voice of Anne Bonny, singing Parting Glass, creates the perfect melancholy mood. All to end with Edward meeting his daughter for the first time at the end of the dock, flowers in hand, is one of the most heartwarming endings to a game ever. Now, the modern day story is kind of whatever here once again. I think whether or not you think it's better or worse than previous games is completely up to your own personal taste. I didn't have any desire to interact with it this time around, besides when I had to just go through specific parts so I could get back into the Animus to continue Edward's story, so that should tell you how little I cared about it. I think Assassin's Creed 4 is a special game, arguably the best in the series. Its world is beautiful and filled with things that never left me bored. And its story is a character-driven look at one man learning to grow past his own selfish desires. Up to this point, excluding future games, I would probably say that it is my favorite. However, I can say confidently that as of today, it's still the best pirate game that has ever been made. But I'm curious about your thoughts on AC4. Do you love it as much as me, or do you have your own problems with it? Let me know in the comments below. I would love to hear from you. And as always, guys, thanks for watching.
Keep it reaches.